Usually when you hear the WWE music, that's because we're bringing on KC Joyner, the football scientist, the one and only, joins us every Monday and Fridays of the football season. And it's week 17, so we got to know from Casey a lot of different things, not just Eagles and Giants, but the whole NFL slate of games. As all guests, KC Joyner joins us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Casey, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Thank you. When I hear that song, I think I'm going to be in a tables, ladders, and chairs match coming up, you know?
Well, I think the more impressive thing is that Hunter, who's not a WWE fan, knew that was Edge's song.
Well, he was my favorite back in the day.
There you go.
I had a little Rey Mysterio, Undertaker, Edge part of my life back in the day.
Okay, there you go.
There you go. I'm all in for all those guys. Well, you still might see Taker coming back for one more year, and Mysterio was around so recently, so still got some tie-ins to today.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Booker T, maybe.
Yeah.
Booker T. There's a good pull right there. All right, so let's get it back to the Eagles, as one person might say. Casey, so one of the conversations this week with the Eagles has been specifically about the fact that this is a road game versus the Giants. And I know that there's a lot of people who have a lot of different questions, but one of the things I wanted to know from you is about the fact that this Eagles defense is allowing almost 12 more points per game on the road versus at home. And this game versus the Giants is on the road. So how much of a concern is that for you from your perspective analyzing this game?
It is a concern because it shows that the Eagles fan base disrupts opposing offenses, and when the team's going home, it's not nearly as good. And I'm concerned about that, and I'm also concerned very much about that Saquon Barkley is back to what his elite form has been. And if you look at his history, going back even to Penn State, he will have a lot of gains where a lot of plays where he doesn't gain a lot of big yards. It might be 3 yards, 4 yards, bam, bam, bam. And he either does that, and then he'll put up a 70-yard gain. A lot of backs will put up 10-yard gains, 12-yard gains. They're not going to break out the big long gainers, but they're not going to get the short gains. With him, it's either boom or bust. The bad thing is, when it's boom, it is a 70-yard play. And the Eagles over the years, and they're like that this year too, when they stop the running game, because they're so aggressive, when they stop the running game, it works. But when they don't, because they're so aggressive, all you got to do is beat one player, and you can get big gains. If I'm the Eagles, I am very worried about making sure I do gap control and maybe keep some safeties back to try to limit him to 20-yard gains.
They did lose Zach Ertz for this game, which we will get to, but they also gained Jordan Howard, and Miles Sanders has been playing terrific. So how do you think Doug Peterson utilizes Jordan Howard coming back into the mix?
I hope he goes heavy. The problem is that the Giants have allowed 100 or more yards to running backs only one time in the past 7 games. So they're stopping the run, and it's not because teams aren't running the ball. In all but one of those games, it's 20 or more carries. So the teams are running the ball against them. They're just not getting big gains. So if I'm him, I want to go heavy as best I can. I want to have Goddard out there. I want with blocking a huge amount of the time. I want to bring extra tackle in there. I want to go heavy there. But one thing I would think that they might do, one thing I've been looking over some stats here, Josh Perkins is a third-string tight end. He played 39% of snaps last week. You go back and look at his senior season at Washington. There were a couple of games when he was with Washington where in the middle of the season he led the team receiving against USC in an upset against USC. 2 games later, he had led the team receiving against Arizona. Like 3 games later, they had another Pac-12 game where he was second on the team receiving. This guy can catch the ball. And if I'm Philadelphia, having coming off of a game a couple weeks back against the Giants where they had 24 targets and 17 receptions for 169 yards and 2 touchdowns to tight ends, that's how much to beat the Giants by. If I'm them, I want the Giants to have to worry about 2 tight ends, because if they don't, then they can't use some of the tight end route combinations they were using last week to get Goddard open. They need to make sure the Giants have to think about 2.
Absolutely. Now let's touch on Zach Ertz. That is Carson Wentz's safety blanket. It will absolutely hurt this team. But Dallas Goedert showed off last week, catching 9 balls and had a fantastic game. So will the Eagles be able to move the football as well as they did over the last few games without someone like Zach Ertz?
I think they're also missing Aguilar, too, if my memory serves correct. I think
yes.
it's all the injury. Yep. So they don't have those guys. But here's the thing. Over the last 4 games, the Giants have allowed 2 or more touchdown passes to wide receivers. Now, they allowed 3 against the Packers in Week 13. The Packers' receiving core is not great. It's good. They've got Adams, but they really don't have anybody else behind them. They allowed 2 to the Dolphins' banged-up receiving core in Week 15. And last week against Washington, and Washington has, they've got, again, we know Sims is a better receiver than everybody thought. Eagles saw it a couple weeks ago. But still, these are backup third-string, fourth-string wide receivers. They allowed 2 more touchdown passes there. If I'm the Eagles, I do want to go heavy, but I want to test that secondary against the wide receivers. I want to see if I can beat the Giants there. And again, I want to go 2 tight ends. I want to make sure they have to think about 2 tight ends and think about route combinations there to say, okay, you're not just going to have to think about Goddard by himself. I want to run combinations. I want to run things off of other receivers because Goddard is the guy. If I'm the Giants, that's who I have to stop because if Goddard plays like he's been playing and the Giants have the weakness against the tight ends like they've had of late, that's going to be the biggest problem for them in the passing game.
KC Joyner joining us at Boardwalk Kind of Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at KC Joyner TFS. He joins us every Monday and Friday here on the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. KC, flipping it over to the Giants, I'm curious of, now that we have a larger sample size on him, what is your perspective on Daniel Jones? I feel like that, for some of us like myself who really doubt him coming out of college, he's shown himself to maybe be a little bit better quarterback than we all thought. But, I look at a guy like Trubisky and I wonder, some of these guys, maybe they just have a limited ceiling despite their athletic ability because we see Daniel Jones has the turnovers. So what is your perspective on the Giants rookie quarterback?
I don't know what really to think about him because there's so much inconsistency in his game. You don't see a week-to-week production from him. I know it's a rookie, and it's hard to expect that kind of week-to-week production. But look at what he did against Green Bay in Week 13. He's 20-37, and he gets 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. It's a terrible contest. Then he goes up against Washington last week and destroys them. The thing for him is that he goes up against Washington and destroys them. Their secondary is banged up. If you give him certain situations, like he had 4 touchdown passes against Detroit, their secondary was in bad shape. You give him a bad secondary, you give him mismatches, he will beat those mismatches. So again, the Eagles, it's playing disciplined defense. Don't give him mismatches. Don't make mistakes because I think he's kind of a streaky quarterback. And if you get him to where you've got mismatches physically and then you make mistakes or get him on a roll, he starts to get on more of a roll. But if you start to get him in situations where he starts to doubt himself, then he has one of those 3 interception games in which or 2 or more interception games in which he has 3 this year.
Staying on Daniel Jones, how do you think Jim Schwartz can dial up a game plan to get him uncomfortable? He does fumble the football a lot, so maybe thinking about this defensive line, what can Jim Schwartz do to really put some pressure on Daniel Jones to maybe forcing some turnovers?
I want to put the game in his hands because really, if you're Schwartz, the number one thing you have to think about is keeping Barker from breaking up this huge gainers. You do everything you can to stop him and then say, okay, now I've got Jones. The big problem for the Eagles is that you've got a guy like Slayton for the Giants, and he had a great Monday night game a few weeks ago, and he can be an impact player, and they've got some players who can be impact players, but again, they're streaky players. But if I'm the Eagles, I'm going to have to stick my cornerbacks in islands, and if I'm sticking them in islands to try to get that extra player in the box and make sure I'm covering all the gaps and get my gap responsibilities and making sure that that Saquon's not trying to break 250 scrimmage yards again like he did recently. If I'm the Eagles, I have to think about that, and then I'm not worried so much about getting a pass rush. So I think it's going to have to be the front four getting whatever pass rush they can, and otherwise you're just going to have those cornerbacks hold up in coverage because I think the Giants are going to try to test any weaknesses in the secondary.
We'll get KC Joyner's pick for the game at the end of our segment. But first, let's review Week 17. And KC, all the games are on Sunday. No Thursday, no Saturday. It's all on Sunday, so it's a nice package day for the end of the NFL season. And
the way it should be.
And I like the way, KC, before we get to each game, I like the fact that each time period has a theme. So like the 1 o'clock games, there's playoff seeding involved. At 4 o'clock, there's playoff spots involved. So it's nice of the NFL to really package it that way for the last week of the season.
They do. They do a fantastic job. I really love having more games on Sunday. I hate the Thursday night package, and I hate all these. I like Saturday games occasionally, but still, the games are on Sunday. The more games you have on Sunday, the more you're getting the communal feel than you are on the other days of the week. But they do a good job of saying we're going to figure out which games are meaningful, and we're going to put the games in 1 o'clock. We're going to try to make the 1 o'clock games meaningful for themselves, the 4 o'clock games meaningful for themselves. So you don't have teams at 4 o'clock looking at the 1 o'clock games going, oh well, whatever we were playing for today is already decided. decided, no, you're going to have teams playing each other at the same time. So, again, the NFL trying to do what it can to put as much meaning into each game as possible.
So starting with the 1 o'clock game, let's go with the Packers and the Lions. Packers still have a chance at a first-round bye. And I think a lot of people have been wondering, how much of the Packers' success this year has been Aaron Rodgers versus Aaron Jones. What do you think, Casey?
I think it's very much Aaron Jones, and I think this is – I was – been not on the Packers bandwagon. I was, okay, they're winning, and but I just didn't see them as I look at them as a double-digit win team. This doesn't seem like a 10-win team. After seeing what I saw on Monday night, okay, I'm now convinced they took a good team and destroyed them with their defense. So they've got the defense, they've got the ground game, and the thing is, back in the day, Rodgers was a power running game and throw vertical. That was his game. I think they're getting back to. In fact, I know they're getting back to that, leaning on their defense. That's the formula that won them a Super Bowl years ago. So I think the Packers are a dangerous team, and they win this game handily.
The Jets versus the Bills. We know the Bills have already locked up a playoff spot, but we also know the Jets are still playing for at least pride, and we know that after last week, we know this team is capable of beating good teams. Could the Jets kind of steal one way for the Bills at the end of the season?
Be curious to see how much the Bills play their starters. McDermott's going to be of the mindset that I believe he doesn't think that you can flip the switch on and off, that if you go to week 17 and say, you can just don't worry about this game, that sends the wrong message to your team. So I don't think he's going to play his starters for a long period of time. He's going to lead them in there long enough. Having said that, I don't know. The Bills are not the kind of team that can get out to a big lead usually, or a big enough lead where they can lead on the backups. And the Jets are a dangerous club. Darnold's a very good quarterback, better than what people are giving him credit for. And Gase is a very good coach, better than he gets credit for. So I think the Jets probably win that one.
Sticking in the AFC East, Patriots still have a chance at the number 2 seed, but they got to win to get it. They're playing the Dolphins. That's former Patriots coach Brian Flores.
They are, and Flores will know how to attack things in certain ways, but Belichick, his track record against his former disciples is very good. And the Dolphins secondary, you want to know who their cornerbacks are? Nick Needham, Jamal Wiltz, and Nate Brooks. Who? I mean, they're down to 6th, 7th, and 8th string cornerbacks. They've got backup safeties, too. Adrian Colbert and Eric Rowe are their safeties. I mean, these are backup cornerbacks. There's so much, and their running game, the run defense is not very good either. And I don't think Miami, with most teams, they can get them into shootouts if they want to. The Patriots defense is good. I think they'll get enough picks against Fitzpatrick that this doesn't turn into a shootout and New England wins handily.
Yeah, I got to say the Eagles off-the-street quarterbacks last year was a better law firm name than the Dolphins have this year, but I digress. Bears versus Vikings. Vikings are locked into that 6th slot. Meanwhile, the Bears are still fighting for pride. There's a lot of talk that the Vikings could be sitting some of their guys in this game.
They are, and it's got to be a concern for the Vikings because that Monday night game was bad. Mike Boone didn't play well, and they ended up taking him out of the game. They put Abdul in there. I think they're not going to have Cook. It looks like they might have Madison. The last report I saw, it looks like Madison was questionable, so they may have him. Chicago is playing better on defense of late. Their offense is improving for the second half of the season. I'm still probably going to pick Minnesota just on talent alone. I really don't trust the Bears, but this is a contest where it won't surprise me at all to see the Bears win this one.
Chargers at the Chiefs. Chiefs playing for that 2 seed, but really Chargers, they're trying to salvage their season. They may make this a much closer game than the Chiefs may want because Anthony Lynn may have these guys ramped up and ready to go.
He might, and the thing is his team didn't play hard for him later in the year, and if you're the Chargers ownership, you want to see that they're going to play hard for their coach because you don't want to see them folding up their 10 in Week 17, especially in a divisional game. That's one thing that's great about this weekend, too, is it's all divisional matchups, so the NFL realizes that puts a lot more value in Week 17 games as well. Having said that, Kansas City right now, they're really dangerous because they're running game. They've got 4 backs now they can rotate in and out, so they're good there. Their receiving game, they got a lot of players. Obviously, they got Mahomes. They've got a lot of players there, but their defense is playing so well. In fact, the last 4-game stretch, I believe, is the fewest points that Kansas City has allowed in 27 years. If I remember the statistic correctly, they're playing on a fantastic pace. So Kansas City is now a team that can win on defense and on offense. Very dangerous.
Browns versus Bengals. There's nothing on the playoffs involved in this game. There's a lot of in-state rivalry, bragging rights going on. And if the Browns lose this game, could Freddie Kitchens be fired, Casey?
I think if the Browns win this game, he should be fired. He's proven he's not a good coach. There are guys who just aren't ready to be head coaches. Their team isn't. You see the infighting. You see him picking fights, hitting players over the head with helmets, or screaming at sidelines. All this stuff is going on. It's like it's not a focused, directed team. And if that's the case, that's on the head coach. That's not on the players. The head coach needs to set the tone. I think that they've got some problems there. Cincinnati's play is playing much better than they have. I still don't know that Zach Taylor is their guy who should be their coach long term. I'm not sure what he is, but they've been a pretty banged up team. Having said that, they've got Mixon and they've got some players there. So I think this is a 50-50 matchup, and I'm probably going to go ahead and pick the home team Cincinnati just because in a 50-50 matchup, I'll play for the upset for pride.
Saints versus Panthers. Saints still playing for something. We know that Michael Thomas wants to keep extending that record. And let's be realistic, Casey. The Saints know that they want to keep that oiled machine well oiled for the playoffs.
They do, and they want to get another home game. And this time they can maybe not get a bad playoff call or a bad pass interference call. And they've got the team to make a Super Bowl. Carolina's run defense might be the worst in the league. They're atrocious. I mean, Kamara and Murray should get all the yards they want. Obviously, you can't guard Mike. They're going to have JV and Elliott trying to guard him. They might move Bradbury over, but they're probably going to have Elliott. Either guy can't do it. They're not very good at that. So they're going to be able to stop him. And the Carolina's playing that backup quarterback too. And so when you add all that up, I think Carolina has a 1 in 50 chance of winning this game.
Falcons versus the Buccaneers, the other NFC South matchup on Week 17. Will Jameis Winston join the 30-touchdown, 30-interception club, Casey?
If I'm him, why not? Go ahead. Go for it. Set a record. You might as well. Leave something to remember you by, because you could get away with throwing. I've said this many times. You could get away if this is 1970 NFL. You could get away with having 30 turnovers because turnovers were so prevalent back then. But the way the NFL has transitioned over the last 50 years, you can't get away with 30 turnovers as a quarterback. Remember, that's just your quarterback. It doesn't include your running backs, your wide receivers, your tight ends. It doesn't include the fumbles they might get. That's just your quarterback. You can't have that. You're going to lose too many games. I think that Atlanta's going to win this game because they played hard for Quinn. They have been, and that's why he kept his job. And I think that Tampa Bay is going to have a long, hard discussion in the offseason because Winston's not going to get his turnover ways changed or turned around. He never has.
Colts versus Jaguars, two teams with very disappointing seasons. And you have one team, they don't know what they're doing with their quarterback, but it does the other team, Casey.
No, they don't. And, Indianapolis, they've got Indianapolis, they're such a well-coached team, though. They've got, you can tell they respect their coach. They're playing hard for their coach. And when they have injuries, Frank Reich knows of ways to move his players around, to move players in the lineup, to find things that players can do. I mean, he is an exceptional coach. And the Jaguars, if they're going to clean house. They've already, Coughlin's already gone. They're going to be firing their coaching staff more than likely. So I think that the Jaguars probably mail this game in, and Indianapolis wins handily.
Let's go over to the 4:00 game, starting with Cardinals and Rams. No playoff implications of the line, but I think it would behoove both teams to finish the season on a high note.
It would, and Arizona's the team that they've got. Kingsbury said. I read a report where he's going to be talking to ownership about, or the Michael Bidwell. They're going to talk about who they're going to keep on their coaching staff and who they're not. So there's some motivation there for these guys to keep their jobs because this is his first year in the league, and he's learning who the coaches are, what they can do within his scheme, and all that. But he's got a well-coached team, and the Rams, like you said, they want to end on a high note too. I think that because they've got a new stadium next year, they want to end on a high note. So I think it's going to be a very competitive contest. But I'll go ahead and take the home team in that one.
Steelers versus Ravens. We know no Lamar Jackson, no Mark Ingram, but for the Steelers, no Marquise Pouncey and no James Conner. So do those absences equal out?
The Ravens are also going to be sitting Earl Thomas. They've got one of their defensive linemen. I think Yanda's from our offensive line is going to be sitting. And they're sitting a lot of players. And the Steelers' defense is so good. It's so strong that I think that you're going to have Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, who, mind you, Justice Hill scored a touchdown last week. He's pretty good, and Gus Edwards has been a solid back, but I don't think they're going to be able to get much done. And I would bet that Baltimore's also going to rotate their starting receivers out of the game eventually. And Andrews probably won't play. They're going to be missing so much talent. And Pittsburgh has so much to play for, and they're going to be trying so hard. I think Pittsburgh will win this one. It might be one game too late for Tomlin to make the playoffs, though.
Titans versus Texans. Titans playing for a playoff spot. Texans are just trying to stay healthy. There's a lot of rumors that we know Deshaun Watson in this game.
rumors of that, and Houston keeps saying, Bill O'Brien keeps saying, well, okay, we're going to play to win, we're going to play to win. I get that, and I understand why. Again, there are teams that realize that you need to try and win in the preseason because it sends the message to your team that winning is important, and you never want to turn that switch off to say, hey, we can take this game off, or we can just turn it back on in a couple weeks. I get that. Having said that, he's got so many injuries on this team, Bill O'Brien does. They've so banged up in so many places that I just don't think that you can go full board there. Now, Tennessee's got a problem with Derrick Henry. He's going to play, but he's got the hammy issue. If it doesn't hold up and they've got to go with Deion Lewis and they've got to go with their running game they had last week, I think that could pose problems for them. Having said that, with what they have in their offense with Tannehill and such, I still think Tennessee wins this one because Houston's just not going to play a full game.
Raiders have a chance at the playoffs if a lot of other things happen, but the biggest problem in front of them is they're on the road in Denver, Casey.
Yeah, they don't do very well. And Josh Jacobs probably misses the game. Washington's good, and they got Richard too. But I mean, Jacobs is the focal point of their offense. Hey, Hunter Renfrow did terrific last week, so they've got an impact receiver. But Denver's defense has been playing much better of late. Not just sort of better, but they're finally playing to the level you'd expect them to play to, given their head coach. So I'm looking at Denver and seeing that. I still think Oakland has more talent and they probably win this contest, but I think it's going to be close enough that I'll probably pick Denver in the upset because I think that Oakland has some secondary weaknesses, and again, missing Jacobs is a big problem for them.
Redskins, Cowboys. One team has nothing to play for. The other team, we're not sure if they can play for a playoff spot. So what do you think of this matchup, Casey?
Kate, I mean, you had last week the Cowboys. We talked before. They threw a ton. They didn't run the ball. Their team doesn't look like they care if their coach gets fired or not. The players don't, at least. They look like they're just going through the motions. Having said that, this is Washington, and this is a game where these teams legit still don't like each other. It's not the rivalry it was back in the day, but I get the impression, well, it's an NFC East game, and none of the teams in the NFC like each other. So Dallas doesn't like them. I think that helps. The Haskins injury, I think that's going to help, and Dallas can still play, can do a Tomlin, as I call it, Tomlin. They can still do it in this contest, but Washington is so talent bereft that I'd be shocked if Dallas didn't win this game.
Sunday Night Football, 49ers, Seahawks for the NFC West title, and the Seahawks, no Dwayne Brown. They brought in two running backs off the street, and Marshawn Lynch and Robert Turman. Meanwhile, the 49ers, they can get home field advantage throughout the playoffs.
They can. The 49ers have had a problem since Sherman got banged up. They had one of the best defenses in the league, but since he came back last week, but he's not quite what he had been. And it's been a domino effect on their defense, too, where having him out just now you've got to have people in there. Emmanuel Mosley has done a good job in his place, but he's not as good as Sherman. So it's one of those situations where it's causing San Francisco to get into shootout games, and Seattle can get into a shootout game, but Seattle still wants to be a ground-heavy team. And you've got, I know I've seen the video of Marshawn, and it looks like he's pretty crisp and all that, but he's not in football shape yet. I mean, this is a guy coming on the street who hasn't played, and I know he is who he is, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him have a good game, but San Francisco is so talented and such a good squad that I'd be shocked if Seattle could come in there with a off-the-street running back and win that contest.
All right, Casey, let's get your pick. Eagles, Giants. Eagles win. They win the division. They lose. Well, every Eagle fan is going to be losing their minds.
And I'm concerned that you don't like to try and have to play two emotional games right in a row. That you would like it last week to have been for the NFC East, so they didn't have to worry about this contest. But playing two emotional games in a row is tough, and it's going to be a problem for them. But when they get Howard back, now they've got Howard, they got Sanders, they got Scott. I mentioned that what they can do with at their tight end position, and I still think they have enough talent at the receiver position against the bereft Washington or New York secondary. Then you add it all up, I still think that 8 out of 10 times Philadelphia wins this contest. They should win it, but if they don't, then it sends a big message that they didn't want to play hard to end the season, and that could be a problem for their coaching staff. So they need to win it in order for this not to be a bad offseason for Doug Peterson.
KC Joyner, follow him on Twitter at KC Joyner TFS for all your NFL news and notes throughout the weekend. Of course, he will join the Sports Bash on Monday to recap all of Sunday's games. And we can say that, Casey, because all the games are on Sunday.
That is awesome. Like I said, they should do this more frequently. I mean, I like having a Monday night game, but I think they should ditch that Thursday night package and move everything over to Sunday. It's just more fun to have more games on Sunday. But having 16 or 15 games or 16 games on Sunday, I think they should do this three times a year because that's the way you should. It makes for more. It's a communal experience, and I think that's what the NFL needs.
All right, Casey, have a great weekend, and we'll catch up with you Monday.
Appreciate it.